Welcome to the Willow City Council regular meeting of April 28th, 2026. Shall we stand and salute our flag? Hey.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation, God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hudson is absent. Vice Mayor Thomas,
Here.
Councilmember Hanson,
Here.
Councilmember Pride, here, and Councilmember Busby.
Here.
Thank you.
Mayor Hudson had a family issue come up this afternoon, and he called me and offered his regrets for his absence this evening. So we hope everything works out for him on that regard. So we will move on to changes to the agenda.
There are no changes this evening.
So we have a few ceremonial items this evening. First one would be Light the Night for Fallen Firefighter, City of Willows Proclamation. Whereas firefighters across the nation selfishly dedicate their lives to protecting people, property, and the environment, often placing themselves in harm's way to keep others safe. And whereas the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation sponsors the Light of the Night for Fallen Firefighters, an annual tribute honoring the brave individuals who lost their lives in the line of duty. And whereas during the week leading up to National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend, landmarks, homes, fire stations, and buildings across the United States are illuminated in red as a visible symbol of remembrance and gratitude. And whereas this tribute serves as a powerful reminder of the courage and sacrifice made by firefighters and offer support to the families, friends, and fellow firefighters they leave behind. And whereas the City of Willows proudly joins communities nationwide in recognizing the extraordinary service and sacrifice of fallen firefighters and honoring their legacy. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Rick Thomas, as Vice Mayor, on behalf of Mayor Evan Hudson and the entire City Council and the citizens of Willows, do hereby proclaim the week of April 26th to May 3rd, 2026 as Light the Night for Fallen Firefighters Week, and encourage all residents, businesses, and organizations to participate by illuminating their homes and buildings in red in honor of those who gave their lives in service to others. In witness whereof, I will have Mr. Hudson sign his official seal on the 28th day of April, 2026. We get Mr. Chief Nate Monk. The next item we have is a proclamation for National Library Week, read by Councilmember Busby.
Thanks, Rick. City of Willows Proclamation, National Library Week. Whereas libraries play a vital role in our community by providing free and equitable access to information, technology, and resources that support education, literacy, and lifelong learning. And whereas libraries and library professionals help transform lives by fostering creativity, curiosity, and connection while serving as welcoming spaces for all. And whereas the American Library Association has sponsored National Library Week since 1958 to highlight the valuable role libraries, librarians, and library workers play in strengthening communities and supporting informed and engaged citizens. Whereas National Library Week was observed from April 19th through April 25th of 2026 with the theme of Find Your Joy, encouraging people of all backgrounds to discover the many ways libraries enrich their lives. Whereas during the week, communities nationwide celebrate library services, recognize the dedication of library staff, and encourage residents to visit their libraries and explore available programs and resources. Whereas the City of Willows recognizes the important role our local library plays in promoting literacy, supporting education, and enhancing the quality of life for all residents. Now, therefore, be it resolved, on behalf of Vice Mayor Thomas, the City of Willows, the City of Willows City Council, and citizens of Willows do hereby proclaim April 19th through April 25th, 2026 as National Library Week in the City of Willows, and encourage all residents to visit their local library, explore its resources, and celebrate the many ways libraries bring knowledge, opportunity, and joy to our community. We're handing to Christine.
Christine. Next, we have our last proclamation for Earth Day, read by Council Member Pride.
Thank you. City of Willows Proclamation for Earth Day. Whereas Earth Day is celebrated annually on April 22nd to raise awareness about environmental protection and encourage stewardship of our natural resources. And whereas the health of our environment directly impacts the well-being, safety, and quality of life of our residents. And whereas communities across the nation recognize the importance of protecting air, water, land, and wildlife for current and future generations. And whereas individuals, businesses, and organizations can all contribute to a healthier environment through conservation, recycling, and sustainable practices. And whereas the City of Willows is committed to promoting environmental responsibility and supporting efforts that preserve and enhance our community's natural resources. And whereas the City of Willows celebrated Earth Day by hosting a Keep Willows Beautiful Earth Day cleanup event made possible through Clean California Litter Abatement Grant funding and conducted in partnership with Waste Management, supporting local efforts to reduce litter, improve our public spaces, and promote environmental stewardship throughout the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved, on behalf of Rick Thomas as Vice Mayor of the City of Willows, and on behalf of the Willows City Council and the citizens of Willows, we do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2026 as Earth Day in the City of Willows and encourage all residents to participate in activities that protect the environment and promote sustainability in our community. And I believe we're giving this to Joe.
Awesome, I appreciate it.
Just real quick, I just want to say that we'll be holding additional events. This is a grant funded from Clean California. So keep your eyes out. We're going to get some civic groups together and hopefully hold a lot of these litter abatement events. So we want a bigger, stronger, and better for the community. So we appreciate you guys coming out and supporting that.
Yeah. I know I had one parent was regretful it was a school day and assured them that we will be doing some activities where the school kids can participate.
Thank you. Item 6, public comment and consent calendar forum. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and may be approved by a single vote unless removed for separate discussion by council or city manager. Individuals wishing to speak on consent items or matters not on the agenda this evening are asked to complete a speaker card and submit it to the city clerk. All remarks shall be directed to the mayor and the council members who are limited to 3 minutes. By law, council cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment for us this evening? Hearing none, I defer to my council members. I do have a question. Well, actually, I don't have a question. On item 6E, the annual weed abatement and rubbish abatement, I think each of the council members got a note that I asked the question about the unpaid liens and that we had 22 properties that have been liened by non-payment from the prior years. And the majority of the money owed would be from the 2 enforcement actions we took under abatement procedures. So we have 2 that are fairly large. One was a $30,000 burned out structure that we had. The other one was Looks like we're in pretty good shape with this. That's the only comment I had on the consent item. Do you have any items, comments? Pleasure of the
Nothing.
Council.
I have none, Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry, did he say he moved to approve?
No, I have
He
none.
said he had nothing.
I have none. If no one else does, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I have a second.
I'll second and also welcome Jesse Powell to the Planning Commission.
Perfect.
We're here. Hearing any more discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Discussion and action calendar. All matters on the discussion and action calendar will be acted on individually. Individuals wishing to speak on these items are asked to complete a speaker card and submit it to the city clerk. Comment should be directed to the mayor and the council members are limited to 3 minutes. The council can only talk about items that are actually listed on the agenda. The first item is finance tools to fund the Willows Police Department. Recommended action is review and discuss options for financing a startup and ongoing costs. I will defer to Marty Brown to start.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor and council members. This item, as you may recall, prior to my vacation, the council directed staff to take a look at what are some of the options for funding the startup costs and ongoing operation costs of a new Willows Police Department. And so to that end, I went to our financial advisors, Wolf Hansen and Company, who have provided financial advisement to the city for several years now, including its pension obligation bond and also its refinancing of its sewage bond and certificates of participation. So I went back to them and asked them if they could help us out with this. And they came up with the staff report and the attached memo. And here this evening to present and discuss and answer any questions you may have, especially about the options that are presented in the attached memo, is Rob Pankratz. Rob is the vice president of Wolf Hansen and Company. And also on Zoom is Bud Levine, who is also an associate of Wolf Hansen and helped out with both of those two bonds that I just mentioned earlier that we did earlier in the last 5 to 6 years. So with that, Rob, would you like to come up and present to the council, please? Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction, Marty. Good evening, Vice Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Rob Pankratz, and I am a Vice President with Wolf Hansen and Company Municipal Advisors. I'm joined here tonight remotely by my colleague, Bud Levine. Bud and I have been working with the city beginning in 2020. And as your city manager said, we worked on 2 main projects: the pension obligation bond, which projected at closing to save the city approximately $3.9 million of its CalPERS obligations, as well as a sewer certificate of participation financing, which saved the city $1.1 million by refinancing higher interest rate sewer obligations and also provided $3.35 million of project funds. Tonight, I have the pleasure of speaking to your group about ways to fund the restart of the Willows Police Department. There are 2 sort of main categories for funding that are important to address. The first is startup capital, which includes things like funding of facilities, funding of equipment, funding of vehicles, and all the other necessary technologies that are required to run a police department. And then the second category includes operational costs, the ongoing costs that you pay every year to run a police department, salaries, benefits, facility maintenance, things along those lines. So jumping into my notes here, there is a staff report as well as an attachment to the staff report that covers the primary options that would be available to the city to fund both the startup capital for the department as well as the ongoing operations. And I'm just going to focus on a few of those solutions tonight, particularly the solutions that are the most comprehensive and the most viable. And then I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm happy to sort of dive into some of the details on some of the programs that may interest this group. So first and foremost, I want to set a baseline of how this department is going to be funded. Presumably, you are going to redirect the dollars that you are currently paying to the county sheriff that currently provides police services, and those funds would then become available to fund your own police department. The next step is figuring out the delta between the amount of funds that are available and the actual cost of funding and maintaining a police department on an annual basis. My understanding is that you are paying approximately $2.5 million per year for police services. And my further understanding is that you estimate it's going to cost approximately $2.5 million to run a police department on an annual basis. I believe that there was a feasibility study done that supported those numbers. However, I understand there are a number of soft costs and startup costs, such as recruiting, facilities, fleet, that weren't necessarily included in that analysis. So one of the things we are trying to determine here is how much additional funding does the city need to support the police department, and where is the balance of that funding going to come from? So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about startup capital. The main solutions to fund facilities and other startup capital for the department would include things like Mello-Roos Community Facilities District bonds, general obligation bonds, certificates of participation, which is essentially lease financing, federal and state grants, any available general fund reserves that could be earmarked for that purpose, as well as any other types of fees that the city may have to support the police department's startup capital. The two solutions that we would recommend would be Mello-Roos Community Facility District bonds and or general obligation bonds. Certificates of participation or lease financing are a good tool to fund facility acquisition and other startup costs. However, they do not necessarily carry with them an annual revenue of any sort. So a certificate of participation would need to be funded by council appropriations on an annual basis, which would mean you would need to have revenues available for that purpose. On the other hand, a community facilities district Mello-Roos bond or a general obligation bond would be a tax measure that would go on the ballot and go before the voters, and then could support a bond on an annual basis that would allow you to pay for facilities and other startup capital up front. A general obligation bond does not have nearly as much flexibility as a Mello-Roos special tax bond, community facilities district bonds. General obligation bonds must be based on the assessed value of the property that's being taxed, whereas a Mello-Roos community facilities district can be based on anything except for assessed value, meaning that different types of properties could pay different rates under this structure. Additionally, a community facilities district, Mello-Roos, can be structured so that when it goes to the ballot, it has both a facilities component and a services component, meaning that the facilities tax would support a bond that would fund capital facilities, but it could also include a separate services tax, which could fund ongoing operations either for a set number of years or virtually into perpetuity if approved by the voters. Both of these tax solutions would require a 2/3 vote of the public. So that is a pretty high threshold of public support. Although with the recent passage of your Measure I tax, it seems like there is generally support in this community to fund services. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we would propose funding ongoing operations funding. So this would be any funding that's needed above and beyond what you have already allocated towards annual police services. The best option would really be a Mello-Roos community facilities services district. As I said, that could be a tax that goes for a set number of years or virtually into perpetuity, and it could fund operations on an annual basis. And it could really be tailored and structured however the city would like it to be structured. One thing that makes it unique is it can be indexed to inflation. So the tax can increase over time, corresponding with an index or an inflation number, because as we know, the cost of delivering services increases every year. So if you're looking for a dedicated revenue source to support those services, it's very beneficial to be able to have an escalator built into that, so you don't get 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and all of a sudden your dedicated revenue source is no longer sufficient enough to support the services that your community desires. Additionally, there is an option to do a parcel tax. A parcel tax is similar to a community facilities services district, although there is much less flexibility in how the tax is structured and what the funds can be spent on. A parcel tax is typically a flat tax per parcel, although there is an allowance to have different tiers based on the zoning of different property, i.e. residential versus commercial versus multifamily. A parcel tax cannot be bonded against, meaning that it would not be very helpful in terms of funding facilities or startup capital, but it is a good tool to fund operations over time. And it is significantly easier and less costly to administer than a community facilities district. There are a couple other options that the city has, but none are as comprehensive or as recommended as the ones I've covered. But if there are specific questions on any other types of taxes, fees, or revenue sources, I'm happy to go into that. Otherwise, I'd like to open it up for any questions or deliberation that you may have. Thank you.
Which if you folks want to start.
Not me. I'm gathering my thoughts. Over there.
Let's start just very, very roughly. CFD bond, kind of rate we talking on increase in property tax, and then what that bond percentage, the interest would be on that.
Yeah, so it would be highly dependent on the term of the financing. But if you're looking at something like a 20 or 30-year financing term, which is typical for facilities financing, the city would be looking at something in the ballpark of 3.5% to 4.5%, depending on the size of the bond.
And then same question for if we did the lease revenue structure. So it says a modest increase in interest. What does that look like?
So that one's a little bit more difficult to pin down because that's going to be more dependent on the city's budget situation and the city's ability to appropriate lease payments on an annual basis. Typically, I'd say you'd get a better interest rate for a COP that has a dedicated revenue source, such as a tax. Now, the tax wouldn't necessarily be tied to the bond, but you could go to a rating agency, go to investors and say, we have identified this revenue source that we've earmarked internally to pay this COP or this bond. But for a 20 or 30-year bond, it'd be a similar ballpark, probably 3.25% to 4.25%, depending on the term. I'm working on a certificate of participation for a community in Marin County right now, and we're expecting an interest rate of 2.75% on a 10-year basis. So the yield curve is extremely flat right now. So 3.25% up to 4.25%, depending on credit quality.
That's all I have for right now. I'd like to hear from other.
Mary?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thanks for presenting, Rob. And hello, Bud. Good to see you again. I know.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, your firm did outstanding work for us. You mentioned the pension obligation bond issue and also the wastewater treatment plant refunding.
Thank you. We also did have a very attractive market to work in, but I think we did a pretty good job.
You did an outstanding job, Bud. Thank you very much. So I have a lot of faith in your firm, and your expertise. I can't thank you enough for helping save the city of Willows financially several years ago. But good work. So with that said, I just want to lay that out because a good report, very thorough report, very self-explanatory, as well as your presentation. If we ended up going this route, I would definitely be in favor of the Mello-Roos CFD, the combined with, and we could, if we did that, we could put a CPI component to that.
Absolutely.
Annual CPI component. Okay. With that said, we just, as you know, we very recently asked our citizens if they wanted to approve or not a 1.5% sales tax increase, which thankfully they did. A good part of that was reestablishing a police department, which obviously that's what we're talking about and attempting to do. But as you know, we still need to provide law enforcement services. Why we build a police department? It'd be nice to have a key, have a switch. We could throw a switch and fire up a police department. Obviously doesn't work that way. So we have to have coverage in the meantime. So realizing that the current contract where the sheriff's office we're paying for currently 2.355 million approximately per year. That's what it would cost us to operate a police department right now, a full service police department in the city, and from my standpoint right now. So having to bridge the gap while we move forward on the police department structure, reinventing the wheel, right? Building a new agency with all those costs involved. That's our issue as we know. The only problem I have with we're all taxpayers, we're all property owners. The only problem with the CFD approach is we're putting the expense, a good portion of the expense of forming a police department and operating a police department on the backs of the property owners, and the property owners only, no one else, just the property owners, right? That's all of us. We pay our tax rates in living in this state right now. It's crazy, right? It's out of control. I really hate to put an additional tax burden on the backs of our citizens here, and only some of our citizens, not right, just the property owners, in order to fund an agency. But if we did that, obviously it would have to go to the public for a vote, and if 2/3 of the voters are in favor of it, then it moves forward. But anyway, just that's my problem with it. But if we went the CFD route, which I think is the cleanest route to go by far, I would definitely want to, and I know it's included in the staff report, and as I'm reading the reports, I was really pleased to see our city staff suggestion that we encompass that with from a public safety perspective, police and fire, which that's what I would like to see if we went this route, a public safety CFD, period. So between that and our general budget, our sales tax revenue, and our other sources of funding, we could provide an outstanding police department and fire department moving forward in the city. And I think I don't know who would be opposed to that, but the tax implication, additional tax burden on the property owners only, which we're all property owners up here, right? Probably everybody in this room is property owner. It's going to be on our burden. So those benefits of having a fully funded, well-functioning public safety agencies, police and fire, would be largely supplemented by only some of the members of the community. So understand my problem. Anyway,
absolutely. And
I'm thinking out loud here, but anyway, go ahead, Rob.
And it's really about striking the right balance. We're certainly not proposing that the entire funding strategy for the police department lies on the backs of property owners, but it's about striking a balance between community facilities tax, district taxes, sales taxes, and other sources of city revenue, such as the existing sources that you have to pay the current police department.
Right.
So, as I understand, a vast majority of this can be covered with existing general fund revenue sources.
Yes.
It's about closing that gap. It's about, as you said, the supplemental funding and then striking the right balance for the community.
So if we're able to do that, on an affordability side, I'd be tentatively in favor of that moving forward. But that's my only issue with this. So Marty.
Just a quick question or comment, I guess. It seems like, it might also be possible for, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, to just do one model for the startup costs. And then when the sheriff's contract is transitioned out, see how the general fund is actually impacted. I mean, the reason we propose this is because when I look at the general fund and how little reserve there is available currently, it doesn't seem feasible to have long-term operational costs. But we could meter this out and try to do just the startup piece of it, and then see how, once we've fully taken back all those funds from the sheriff's contract, see how it actually impacts when the PD's up and running, and come back, and if needed, do something longer term. Isn't that possible, Rob, to do it that way?
Yeah, that's absolutely possible. So one thing that this city could consider bringing to the voters is a community facilities district that funds facilities. And then once the bonds that the tax supports are paid off and retire, that tax can continue for a number of years and sort of switch over to supporting operations. So it may be a number of years before the budget of the police department really grows to a point where the existing city revenue sources don't support it. So that would give you a number of years to plan, and then ultimately a dedicated revenue source once the bonds are paid off.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Rabbit. Yeah, that's something I didn't think of. So thank you very much. I mean, sounds like definitely a viable option.
It's just maybe
consider.
figuring out the pain a little differently.
Oh, absolutely. No. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
And in terms of the cost of a services CFD, just sort of pulling numbers out of thin air here, if there was a $500,000 per year need for supplemental funding, that would be an approximately $225 per household annual charge.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are the numbers again? The total funding on that?
Yeah. So if, like, let's say you needed 500,000 on an annual basis,
okay,
the per household tax would be approximately $225, roughly speaking. I think you guys have about 2,200 homes in town. Is that correct?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
And that's annually, correct? Not monthly.
Yes. Annually.
Right, yeah, annually. Yeah. Okay, Rob. Thank you. Thank you, Marty.
Another thing to keep in mind is we're talking generalities here tonight just to get started. But once this moves along, as you know, if you've seen us work before, we'll come back to this council with specific examples of what's available, with yields that exist in the market at the time we present it, and show you the comparison of what it would cost, where you can make your decisions based on much more accurate numbers than just the theoretical numbers we're talking about now. This is just to give you a flavor and idea of what we're dealing with, so that we can get started to then bring that back to you in specifics, so that nothing is going to be done without your approval each step of the way.
No, thank you. Thank you for the reminder, Bud. Thank you very much. Okay, Rob, Bud, thank you. And that's all I had.
Yeah. So a couple points of clarification after all the discussion. So a Melrose district, can that be residential and commercial? Can that be all properties? You were talking just residential, but it can be
all properties,
can be
correct?
So it sounds like with a Melrose, we can do startup or operational. That's the most user friendly. But I think what I'm hearing us saying tonight is that if we had the perfect world and a windfall and we could just start it up, we have the money for operations, at least today. We know inflation is going to be an issue. So I really think one of the key things we need to look at is get an idea of what that cost looks like for our startup, which we've got some numbers from the feasibility study, but that's going to help. I mean, a lot of great options, and this is really a great packet. I like the flexibility you mentioned in the Melrose, where it could initially be for the startup and then it could transition over to ongoing operations. I'm also thinking just the biggest basic number that you threw out. I think that's important to come up with an idea of cost and get an idea of what that tax number might look like in a community service district, Melrose, because I mean, that's the bottom line for people. And if they're weighing, I'm paying $44 a year to be able to go dump my solid waste out at the landfill, but I'm paying $250 a year and I've got great public safety, so having some being able to quantify what our numbers look like for bringing back the PD, which is going to require some work because, we don't know where. I mean, that's a lot of homework that we have to do. I tend to like the Melrose. I like the flexibility in that. I understand that looking at grants, we should avail ourselves of any opportunity, but can't count on those. Time frame. So if we were to make a decision, I mean, the front end stuff, just in your, again, grabbing information out of the air, so to speak, tonight, usually about how long does it take to get all the numbers together to be able to move forward? In a case like ours, where we'd have to quantify.
Right. So the anchor event for this city, if you wanted to move forward with the community facilities district, would likely be the ballot deadline for the November election. You would likely want to do this at a general election to save on election costs. And so the analysis could be done over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, depending on if we and the other needed parties are given the formal go-ahead from the city. And I suspect with council cooperation and staff cooperation that we could do this well before the deadline for the November ballot. However, if it goes to the November ballot and then is approved, there's still a whole procedural formation process that takes anywhere from 7 to 10 months, roughly. So you likely would not receive your first tax dollar until math here, like early 2028.
And just to clarify, Rob, we did clarify with the county when the ballot resolution and language, and it would be due July 14th to November. The very, very.
But it can be done.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
And so do we have any idea what the costs are for a special election?
I don't, and we'd have to work that out.
Because unfortunately, we're talking about this now with a deadline to try and do something very, very quick. And I'm not always a fan of doing things hastily. But then at the same time, you don't have a general election for 2 years, which doesn't work very well either. And then an additional cost.
I mean, I from what I've heard in other cities, I suspect a special election would cost anywhere between $10,000 and $25,000 for a city of this size. Kind of a broad range, but
I think that's a good guess.
Rick, if you don't mind, before you wrap it up.
Go ahead.
So I thank you for all this. I do want to kind of talk a little bit about how we got here and why we are talking about this. I think that as soon as we turn around and we say, hey, we need more money for a police department, everybody's going to say, what was Measure I for? And I think that's fair. I think that we need to kind of close that gap. If anybody's been watching or attending our finance committee meetings, we have a Measure I oversight committee that tells you where every dime of that money is going. Currently, with Measure I, we're looking at about $160,000 to $170,000 structural surplus for the budget. $160,000 isn't enough cash flow to stand all this up, while also paying GCSO. While we are doing all this to get this all stood up, we have a cash problem. We're trying to bridge the gap from that cash problem of, hey, we can't afford the truck, we got to go get a loan. Unfortunately, loan structures for municipalities aren't as simple as private business. So that's what we're trying to close here. And I just feel like we need to kind of tell people that's immediately, as soon as we do this, everybody's going to say, what was Measure I for? Where'd that Measure I money go? The alternative to this, like I said, about $170,000 in surplus. The alternative of this is, hey, we don't do anything. Our budget magically doesn't increase for about 10 years. We can save our pennies and maybe we can afford this in a few years. We unfortunately are not in a position to be able to do that. So we're under a little bit of a timeline thing. So we're trying to come up with a way to bridge the gap of standing this up while having GCSO provide law enforcement services while we are working on getting our law enforcement services going. So to get ahead of the whole Measure I thing, I think that needs to be said. Just off the consultant's deal, we're probably talking about a $2.5 to $3 million bond in one-time costs, not in operational costs. That's $80 to $100 a month in property taxes. It's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to our community. And so I do. I agree with everybody here where a CFD bond is the tool for the job. We have a education campaign ahead of us, notwithstanding the budget issues we have and the timeline issues we have. So this is a big lift. We just need to all be on the same page, and everybody needs to be educated throughout the process. And that's all I have.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. No, I absolutely agree with Matt, and yeah, thank you, Councilmember Busby. In my run up, I was trying to get there, but you said it much better than I did. As far as it's just all about the dollars. Okay, it's just all about the you know, the empty fishbowl that we have our pennies in. We just don't have enough pennies to do both at the same time, right? So, and I agree with when you mentioned the $225 per parcel, for example, just generally, that is a hard sell. I circled that number, 220, another 225 on the backs of, say, for example, say a residential property. But I'm not concerned about a timeline if we move forward with this. It has to be an educational campaign because none of us want to pay additional taxes. I don't want to pay one more dime of additional taxes. It's insane. But this is public safety, right? This is important. And our sworn obligation as elected members of the city council is number one, to keep the public safe. That's our sworn obligation. And you know, we need law enforcement protection. So period. Anyway, but I'm not concerned about the timeline because dealing with Wolf Hansen before they can get it done. They can get this done, but it's going to have to be an absolute public educational campaign. And, you know, once again, asking our citizens, our property owners this time for more money. That's, and I say that's the only thing that bothers me, but you know, we still need to provide law enforcement services while we're building a new agency. So there you go. So thank you, Matt.
I also think being that these GO and CFD bonds are 2/3, we need a plan B in our back pocket in case that they don't get adopted. So what does that look like on doing a certificate of participation, you know, the interest and all that stuff? I think that debt service, we're going to have to find revenue to pay that debt service anyway. So we have things.
I'd like to see a mixture of options too, right? And I know Wolf Hansen can provide those, but yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Might
Thank you,
get
Mr.
asked a
Vice Mayor.
question or two here in a minute.
It's probably your turn, Rick.
I don't know if you want to clean up completely or you want to bounce around. I just got to thinking, I mean, if we're having this conversation and thinking we can handle operational costs with the money we're currently allocating to the GCSO. And so if our true immediate need is our startup cost, you know, to get it up and running, looking at an option where we did look at a bond or something for the pure startup costs, short term, get the money, get it done. And then by that time to do the educational campaign and maybe still do a Mello-Roos at some point to maintain operationally public safety for the community, which would take some of the pressure off just our need for revenue. You know, as expenses keep climbing, we're good now, but 5 years from now, is our revenue going to keep up with our expenditures? So that would get us a startup quicker without a vote, right?
Absolutely. We would
And-
not need an election for a COP.
So to me, the way I look at that is it may cost a little bit more in terms of the debt service, but we get it done immediately. We're not penalizing our property owners for that. We can get it up and running. And then then we're selling the benefit, right? And if there's a need then for operational help that a Mello-Roos would be a good tool for, then we could pursue that.
And one analysis that we could do is to see how much in bond proceeds we could get you on a COP based on what your projected surplus on Measure I funds are, so that it would support the police facilities via paying the debt service on the facility bond.
And it may not be much, but anyway, just a thought.
Okay, I'm going to take my turn.
Yes. I'll be quiet.
You mentioned that the 3.5% to 4.5% for the general obligation bond. And in your write-up, you say that the general obligation bonds are typically a little bit less interest than Mello-Roos.
Yes.
Do you have an idea what the margin would be?
It depends on a lot of things. It depends on how the tax is structured for the CFD. But generally, general obligation bonds would probably be about 0.5% better in interest rate.
The other thing you mentioned in your discussion tonight was that the general obligation bonds would be based on the value of the property acquired or used.
That's right.
So we would have to actually have a firm number for police station, number of vehicles, number of weapons, how much the T is. We'd have to have all that wrapped up in order to proceed with it.
Well, you wouldn't need a firm number of all of the costs, but you'd need a firm number of all the costs that are going to be paid for with bond proceeds. And I want to add that a general obligation bond can strictly only pay for capital and facilities. You really can't, I mean, some lawyers may say that you can use it for vehicles or other equipment, but generally it's just capital facilities based on the useful life.
Right. So
yeah,
based on that and being fiscally cheap, so I like to pay little as interest as possible. When I went through all the paperwork, it looked to me like if we did a general obligation bond for the physical assets, we got, say, $7 million or whatever, build a facility, a car, other stuff. Then do the Mello-Roos for ongoing needs. What I've heard tonight was we could actually do that 2 or 3 years later. My question is, would we be better off trying to present all of that as a package up front? So we're not double dipping to the people says, wait, let's pass this bond. Now you want more. If we passed it all at once and said, this is the overall total plan, that might be a better way to go. Now, maybe the Mello-Roos and the interest rate isn't that much difference in the cost to do the Mello-Roos versus and the general obligation wipes out the excess interest or the marginal interest. But I like the concept. Now, add on to what Matt said. Currently, out of the Measure I funds, we've spent $1 million of the Measure I money on the sheriff this year. So out of the $2.25 million we got from Measure I, or projected, haven't seen it all yet. We've allocated $1 million. I think it's 1.1 towards the sheriff's contract. So we have that. Now, say I don't trust my future council members, but we need to be able to make sure we protect the money that we have in our current budget, general fund, continues to go to the police department. We don't, well, we now have this funding source to pay for the police over here, so we're just going to rate that, have extra. That's further discussion down the road, how you put some guardrails on it. And then on the fire department and the police department, I like the concept. I'm not sure how you structure the guardrails or the lanes of what goes to the PD and what goes to the fire department. Now, fire departments get paid for, but fire department has apparatus needs like a $2 million fire ladder truck. And I just read in my sewer study that a jet truck is $800,000. Lord. So I'm on board with my fellow council members about the Mello-Roos ongoing. I'd like to know more about the general obligation bonds and could we do the 2 of them together?
You could absolutely do the 2 of them together, but you would need 2 separate elections for each one. Whereas if you're doing a community facilities district, you could do the facilities and the services component with a single election.
Likelihood of passage, I think.
And with the community facilities district, you could really pay for virtually everything under the sun you'd need for a police department: facilities, weapons, vehicles, facility maintenance, all of your operational costs. Whereas a general obligation bond can really only fund capital facilities and buildings. You can't fund weapons, cars, unless you find an attorney that's willing to say so. But generally, they're not, in my experience.
Well, and then we have this other elephant in the room. The real reason why the police department went away in 2017 was the ability to hire officers, and the existence of bribe money, if you will, what they're paying for signing bonuses throughout Northern California to police officers. That just really worries me that we'd even be able to hire police officers and get some, and probably we're looking at hiring a interim police chief that has some familiarity and knowledge to build one. And once he's done, he's not going to want to run it. And then we bring in a final police chief. And the total cost of what's a police station? And how do we put those numbers together? We go back and hire a consultant to put those numbers together? Because if we're moving forward in that direction, we got to have real numbers of what we're looking at. Is it $5 million, $7 million, $10 million? Who really knows?
And the facility itself, are we finding an existing structure to retrofit or city hall? Or are we building something? And a lot of questions.
Well, that's another discussion for another time, I'm sure. I have some thoughts on that, but
Got to know where we're putting it if we're bringing it back.
I think we'd have to build one someplace. And I think it's probably going to be cheaper to build it than it would be to model one.
Better for the long term.
Putting up a public building costs at least $10 million these days.
Unfortunately, if it was privately built, it could be done for about 2.5.
Keep in mind that police department also has a lot of specialty equipment and security that's not just standard like this.
I understand. That's why it's probably cheaper to build a new one. But I think we're probably looking at least $10 million when we're all said and done. And I don't know if that covers all. So I think we have to decide, how do we get some real numbers to put around the top of this? And then we can actually have some conversations. Do we really want to do that? That's about the end of my comments.
Yeah, Rick, and your comments, I mean, and all of the comments are extremely relevant that I've heard tonight. And you're spot on. I mean, all these things cost money. Hiring and retention, huge. Hiring and retention, huge. Facilities, huge. Luckily, if we ended up going that route, I mean, too soon to talk about that now, but we do at least have the real estate to do that right out here. But anyway, so all good points. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Bud.
Anybody in the public that would like to ask a question? Mr. Ross. Marlene, could you take my microphone?
Arlene's on the way.
Can I ask actually a quick question beforehand? If the council wanted to continue this item till the May 12th meeting when the mayor was also here, would that still be enough time to do something? Council decided to take action on the 12th and not tonight? The July 14th deadline looming? I know that, I mean, it sounds crazy to even ask, but just because the mayor's not here and the council is still digesting the concept, I just thought maybe that would be a possibility.
Yeah, options with numbers could certainly be presented at the May 12th council meeting, but it wouldn't be a level of detail that you would need before you were to put something on the ballot.
No, I just meant, is it still enough time if they took action possibly on the 12th and not tonight? Just because the mayor is absent, and also, like I said, the council's, regardless of the numbers that you could bring to the table or not, if the action isn't taken till the 12th, would there still be, that's literally 2 months exactly, enough time to prepare everything?
It would be tough, but it could be done.
Okay.
I
Rob,
mean, I
Rob,
like this guy.
Rob, you might want to mention the fact that might be important is to get the team in place prior to that May 12th meeting. They're going to have a couple of other consultants that you're going to want to have working on this that would make things move along faster. And we can discuss whether there's what money might be required to be guaranteed. But, the bulk of it would be on a success base. But the important thing is to get the team put in place so that everybody can move forward and not have to be delayed by looking for advice on different aspects of the procedure. That always works the best.
Also, I want to clarify quickly. I'm not trying to back the council into a corner. There is also the possibility that even if it was continued, the council would decide not to do anything, not to move forward at this time. So I'm not trying to, I don't want to presuppose that something would happen on the 12th, but
No, I'm not
this is,
I'm not suggesting that needs to be done today. I would say the May 12th, though, you'd want to then at that point be prepared to make sure you hire the team so that then everybody can hit the ground running and come back with real proposals.
Yes,
thanks for clarifying.
I'd say really what would need to be determined here is if you want to pursue a tax for the November ballot, you need to decide quickly which type of tax you're going to pursue, and we need to put the team together right away so that the detailed analysis can be run, put before the council, and we can take all the procedural steps that are required for an election in November. If we're looking at other items such as COPs, such as taxes that would be reviewed at a special election, then we have a lot more flexibility.
So it raises a question for me. Time is short. So the longer we wait to make a decision to move forward with something is just going to exacerbate our situation. If we said tonight that we wanted to move forward with looking into the formation of a Mello-Roos district, and your company started expending time on that, putting a team together, starting to put the information together with the thought that we're going to most likely pull the trigger on something like that, but then say we didn't. So the work that's been done, we have a cost associated with that, but could some of that work be sitting on the table to be used later? Would it be wasted time and effort? Because I'm kind of like, that every time we wait, to make the decision later, it's just later, right? So from my perspective, I'd like to make some decisions about moving forward. And I think the biggest decision we have on our table is, are we bringing back the Willows PD? Is that our intention? If that intention is yes, then we know we have the hard facts of cost to start it up, the hiring issues, the educational component. We have all those things we have to deal with, but we have to deal with that. So at what point are we going to make the decision to say we're going to move forward? I'm of the mindset that I would move that we start moving forward, knowing that there'll be a time where maybe we get new information and we find out that we can slow down.
We'll have you hold on to that. That sounds like you're planning on a motion. Let's hear from the public first.
Sounds like a good idea.
Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Doug Ross with the Valley Mirror. I'm asking you for the press. I maybe needn't say this, but for myself as a resident of the city of Willows also. It's a couple of things. One, Rob, is there any outstanding examples in California or the West or anywhere of the fire police hybrid that is a public safety entity that is a possibly useful model? Right. I was going to ask you as a companion thing, because I can have mobility issues, and I don't mean to dramatize that, but could I get a card from you, your card from you, before we leave? And the other thing I was going to say, this is kind of out of the science fiction dimension, but that's kind of where I live, so it's not unusual for me. I was wondering if it was possible to contract with the sheriff's department to put a detachment in which the lawmen wore Willows Police uniforms. The vehicles were decals of Willows Police Department. It was be kind of like a branch office of the sheriff's department, except that they provide a lot of the moolah, and to everyone else, it would look like Willows had a police department, which it in fact would have. It's kind of like, I know, way out there in the sky, but I fell out of bed one night and thought of that. I don't know whether I hit my head and I thought of it, but gee, why can't the sheriff's department just set up a model that looks like, walks like and talks like the Willows Police Department, I wonder if there's some provision under the larger federal, state, and um, what do you call it, overarching laws that would permit something like that. So I'm going to conclude with that.
Are you done, Doug? Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Pride's comments. I mean, we've been talking about this for some time now. I am prepared to move forward with reestablishing a police department, period. And I've talked to a large number of constituents, and I would put probably about 97% of those I've spoken with are in favor of reestablishing a police department. So I'm confident moving forward. We got to move forward. We've been talking about it. I mean, it's all about money. That's what we're talking about, the funding here. So I'm prepared to do whatever we need to move forward. And I would propose that this needs to be on the general election, not a special election. That's all I had, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Well, I guess we can formalize that if we
If you
want to
would,
do.
please.
I would move that we direct staff to proceed with a Mello-Roos community, whatever district, lost my words.
Community facilities.
Community Facilities District, with the intention of getting it on a future ballot.
Second the motion.
Any discussion?
Can we amend that to moving forward with the Mello-Roos CFD with a certificate of participation Plan B in our back pocket in case the 2/3 fails?
I would accept that amendment.
I would second that amendment as well.
So we have a friendly amendment that's been moved and approved.
And can I just clarify? The CFD, the bond and for both startup and ongoing expenses, or there's sort of the Mello-Roos, there's for two Mello-Roos.
Right. So I would have the motion specify that the Mello-Roos Community Facilities District would be for startup and operational. If the consultant needs to know that going in, I mean, startup's the most important thing that we need. I mean, we think we can handle operational, but if we're going to do a Mello-Roos, we need to just bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, I think it has to include operational because there's going to be overlap where we're going to be having to pay a GCSO contract while we're standing this up. So it has to
Yes.
include operational.
From a common sense perspective, that'd be the only way to go. That'd be all of our bases are covered, and we'll have a package that we can definitely move forward with and not piecing it together. It'll be one presentation. So.
Okay, Madam Clerk, do you have that motion succinct,
Yes,
sufficient enough to read it back to us?
yes. Direct staff to proceed with the Mello-Roos for community, well, I have CSD, Community Services District, and then you also said Community
It's a community facilities
Facilities
district.
District.
Yeah.
Amended with a certificate of participation for startup and operational for a Plan B, as a Plan B.
Correct?
Right. And just make sure it includes both startup and operational in the
Include-
Mello-Roos
Yes, for the Community and Facilities.
and for
District.
the next.
Gretchen?
Yes,
Future
so what
ballot.
I was going to say is maybe we should read that as creating a Mello-Roos gift of
Okay.
operational and startup costs with the COP is
Correct.
I would accept that language.
Last,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
okay.
Thank you.
We'll
Gretchen.
vote for this one.
Councilmember Pride,
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson,
Aye.
Councilmember Busby,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas.
Aye.
Thank you.
So a final comment to that, and this is kind of directed at Rob. Since Mayor Hudson was not able to be here tonight, if we could at our May 12th meeting, have an item on the agenda that kind of spells out next steps and, you know, kind of how that's all going to work. And if there's any preliminary data that we could see at that May 12th meeting, that would be ideal.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Bud.
Thank you for your showing up. Great presentation. We appreciate that. And look forward to working with you.
We
Thank
do
you.
too. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bud.
Thanks, Bud.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Bud.
Item 7B, Proposition 218 Sewer Rate Study. Recommend action, receive initial presentation from LT Municipal Consultants regarding the city's Proposition 218 Sewer Rate Study and provide preliminary comments, direction to staff. Who starts?
I'll start. Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. Joe Betancourt, Community Development and Services Director. The item before you today is looking at a sewer rate study. Our current sewer rate study was completed in 2021 and expires at the end of this fiscal year for 25-26. The city went out to RFP and selected LT Municipal Consultants to perform our sewer rate study and executed that contract on February 24th, 2026. And in the audience today, we have Sophia Mills, who works for L&T Municipal Consultants, and she'll be going over a review of the more technical details of the sewer rate study, and we will follow up with any questions you have after that.
Welcome.
Hi,
Good
Sophia.
eve- Hi there. Good evening, Vice Mayor and council members. Thank you, Joe, for the introduction. My name is Sophia Mills. I'm a financial analyst with LT Municipal Consultants. And as Joe mentioned, we've been working since about the beginning of March with city staff. My colleagues and I have been working on the sewer rate study. And if I could have your assistance with the presentation, please. So just to give some background first, if we could go to the next slide. So, like Joe mentioned, sewer rate studies are typically conducted once every 5 years. That's to comply with all the requirements of Proposition 218, which is kind of the legal framework for rate studies. So the city's last study was conducted in 2021. The reason that we conduct sewer rate studies separately from, other city matters is because the sewer fund is an enterprise fund, so it's operated similar to a private business where it should really be self-supported from the rates and charges paid by customers. So the goal of our study is to adopt rates for the next 5 years, beginning with this fiscal year. So one thing to note, as we'll talk about more on the schedule of that, so the city does bill their sewer rates on the tax roll. So our deadline to get everything on the tax roll would be August 10th of this year. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So to get everything done by August 10th, we have a few requirements to meet. The first is to calculate the rates and charges. And tonight, what I'll go over is the preliminary calculations of what each customer would pay for each of the next 5 years. Once I get your feedback, we'll revise the rates as directed. And then the next step of that process would be to go out for the Proposition 218 public hearing process. And the way that works is that we'll need to prepare a notice that gets mailed to all customers in the city and all property owners, informing them of an upcoming public hearing on the rates. And we're legally required to mail that notice 45 days before holding a hearing. So in order to give staff enough time to place everything on the tax roll for August 10th, we are proposing that the hearing should be held at the July 14th meeting, meaning that the notices will be need to be sent out before the end of May. So if we could have the next slide, thank you. So the rate study process has 3 main phases. Tonight, I'll focus more on the first 2, since that's where we're reviewing the numbers in more detail. And then the third phase, as I mentioned, is the public outreach. So the first part of our process is the financial plan. What that means is that we look at the city budget and audits, other financial information to determine the total amount of revenue that is required from rates. Once we determine that total revenue requirement, then we can move on to the second phase, which is rate design. And per legal requirements, the goal of rate design is to allocate that total cost we want to collect between each customer proportionally based on how they use the sewer system. So first, if you could go to the next slide, please. I just want to go over a high level overview of the key kind of drivers of this study and the key considerations we've been taking into place with this draft. So from a financial planning perspective, the city's sewer fund is doing well financially in terms of covering operations and existing debt payments. But we have identified with city staff, there's about 7.8 million of crucial infrastructure improvements to be completed over the next 5 years. So the main driver of the rate increases is to ensure that the city has sufficient funding for those projects. From a rate design perspective, the main goal with this study is to, like I mentioned, ensure that there is proportionality in the rates. So, for instance, commercial customers may use the system more, and who may use the system more should pay more, whereas someone who is in a smaller apartment should pay a lower rate because they use the system less. And then the third consideration that I mentioned is that tax roll deadline for public outreach. So I'd like to now move into the financial plan. If you could go to the next slide, please. So like I mentioned, the city is covering its operations. So current rates generate about $2.9 million each year, which covers operating costs of about $1.5 million, and then additional debt payments of about $540,000 per year. So over the next 5 years, the city will need to continue funding those debt payments. And then we expect that operating expenses will stay the same with inflationary increases each of the next 5 years. The capital projects that the city intends to fund, like I said, total about 7.8 million. And we have spent a lot of time going over this and have tried to the best of our ability to average those costs somewhat and spread those costs over the next 5 years. But it is an average of about $1.5 million per year in crucial capital improvements. So most of those are to replace old and failing infrastructure before it becomes an emergency critical repair situation. So a lot of that includes pipeline work, completing the project for pond liners at the treatment plant, and then eventually replacing the back truck. If you could go to the next slide, please. So the overall ask for total revenues begins at a 10% rate revenue increase for next fiscal year, followed by 2 more years with 10% increases, and then 2 years at 5% increases. So based on our analysis, these are the rate increases that would be necessary to fund the city's full capital improvement plan. You can see on the chart, I'm not sure if you're looking at it in color, but another consideration is that we don't want the city's reserves to get too low. So this will ensure that the city can also keep up with inflation and maintain reserves sufficient to fund any emergencies. So that 10% increase that we're proposing to go into effect in the first year. One thing I want to note, and as we move into rate design, I'll go into that, but because we also have changes proposed to how the rates are allocated between different customers, the 10% is projected to be the total amount that city revenues will increase by, but customers of different customer classes will not all get a 10% increase. The increase to each customer will depend on class, and I'll go into that now. If we could move ahead, please.
Is it
Go ahead.
better if we have questions about some of this, or do you want to wait and take questions at the very end? Because I just have a question about this money part right here, but I can till the very end. I don't know if you have a preference.
Either way is good with me. I'm happy to answer a question now if you have.
Fire away.
Fire away. Well, I'm just looking at page 7 of 19, the slide. So we currently have reserves of 1.6 million.
Yes.
It says our current revenue, so that's based on our current sewer rates. Our current revenues are 2.9 million a year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that covers operating expenses of 1.5 million plus a debt service of 540, which leaves almost $900,000 a year in reserve. Is that being applied as ongoing revenue? What's happening with that $900,000
So
here?
that's a great question. And a lot of that is being spent toward existing capital projects. So the remaining money, that 900,000, it's at the city's discretion how to spend it. Again, there's 1.6 million in cash in the bank. That extra operating revenue of 900,000 is projected to be used toward capital improvements, but it won't cover the full scope of improvements needed.
So there's improvements over the 7.8 million that the
Mhm.
900,000 is going to cover, and that's invisible here. We're not seeing that, what that looks like. I mean, so what I'm seeing here is that the increases to cover the 7.8 million in identified need over the next 5 years, as shown on page 7.
Correct.
But now I'm hearing you say that the 900,000 a year from our current rate structure is also paying for capital improvement projects in addition to these.
So it'll be added to the reserve part of this or be,
Yes, so the 900,000 will cover a portion of those improvements, and then additional rate increases are needed to cover the remainder. Does that?
it's baked into the formula to show over the next 5 years of capital improvement projects and where our fund reserve goes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so the rate increases being proposed are to cover the 7.8 million?
Mhm.
Okay, and so the 7.8 million is the cost of what we have here, 4 and 1.5 and 1.4 and 800,000. So basically over 5 years, we're going to have almost $5 million that we're collecting, and we're going to use that for something else that's not shown in this study.
So we'll be doing annual sewer replacement projects and work at the wastewater treatment plant in the tune of this 7.8 million dollars.
But my question is the 7.8 million what you're anticipating additional, is the rate increase intended to collect the 7.8 million?
Yes.
So we have 900,000 of our current rate structure that we're not spending,
It will go to.
according to this. And we already have a $1.6 million reserve, so we
So
want to have
I think if you look at the sewer financial projection plan, which is on page 4, so that $900,000 goes into where we're spending the money at per year, and it'll also go towards either keeping the fund balance at a steady rate so that we're sustainable, or it'll go into the infrastructure piece of it.
So on page 8, the sewer financial projections, we have our orange is our operating expenses, and then we have our existing debt. So that's a little bit over 2 million a year. Our revenues currently are 2.9. I'm assuming at the rate we're collecting this year at the 5-year cap, right?
Yes, so the 2.9 million is based on the audited revenues from last year plus the 12% increase
But
that went into effect at the start of this fiscal year.
but that's actually new money coming in. It's not part of the reserve. It's the new money that's coming in from the rates being paid.
Yes.
Okay. So then the blue
So the
is our capital project. So we're looking at spending $1 million plus in some of those. Yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
I'm not following it from what I can see on paper, but that's why I wanted to ask the question now before we got into
okay,
the
and
structure itself.
we do have a detailed list of what the anticipated projects are for each of the next 5 years. I'm
Here's some.
not sure if that's in with the packet or.
Yeah, we got it.
Yes.
to
Okay.
us later.
You have that.
Okay, yeah, I can get you that. So in the detailed packet, that was table 6.
No.
Yeah, on page 7.
Yeah, so the detailed package just goes through the list of projects, but I don't know if Is that a part of your question, Laura? I don't think
No,
it is.
again, it's the 7.8 million. I'm still not sure what we're doing with the extra $900,000 a year that's based on our current rates. So if our rates are currently $74 a year
Mhm.
and they go up however much, the difference that they go up is the amount that's intended to offset the 7.8.
Yes.
Okay, so the $74 though is generating 2.9, and of that 2.9 million, 900,000 is basically not being spent, according to just what I can.
According
see.
to that. So it's written in government budget fees.
Well, I'm just hearing there's other.
And I'm going to ask for something a little bit
spent.
clearer because I don't understand a lot of it either.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I know it's confusing. So if you look at table 7 in the detailed packet, which is on that next page, page 8. This is kind of the background of detailed information of where we're projecting how the money is going to be spent. So you could see that some of the rate increase money is going toward the projected operating expense increases, which are projected to increase, inflationary increases each year. And then below in the non-operating expenses, you'll see where CIP projects are expected to be spent each year. So the total result of that, the 900,000 that was a net revenue projected for this year, is going toward a portion of those projects. And that 7.8 million number that I quoted is the total sum of the CIP projects over all 5 years. So
Yeah,
with the increases, we've tried to phase them in over the 5 years. So the net result is that by the end of the 5th year, we're projecting that the city will end up with about the same level of cash reserve. And we don't recommend that you spend down the cash reserve further. Part of the reason for that is that you are required to maintain a certain level of reserve because you have outstanding debt payments. And then another reason is that if there are any issues or emergencies, it's important to have some cash on hand, particularly because like disbursements from the county in terms of collecting payments through the rates, those only happen twice a year. So it's important to maintain cash on hand in case of emergencies.
If I could just add to, we have a certificates of participation still, and there is a debt service ratio that is required. We're required to maintain not just the minimum amount we have to pay back, but also a reserve above that. And I would think that that's part of the reserve would be included in the 9,000.
Yes. Yes, that's
I think
included.
it's a ratio of 1.3.
And I'll just add too, if it's not, following the green line with the fund balance, you can see where we're going to be at in 26, 27. And that fund balance ends up almost exactly the same at the end of 30, 31. So that green line basically shows us building reserves, and as bigger projects come through, like 20, 29 and 30, that fund balance is going to dip. So all that 900,000 that's going to that fund balance, if you follow that line, it will go up and down, but after a 5-year period, we'll be at the same fund balance, which is the goal, is to maintain that fund balance. So increasing the rate keeps our fund balances the same while allowing for those $7 million, $7.7 million in projects.
I think if you look at the tables, you can follow it. It's just the way it is on this one table where it says we have 2.9, and that number doesn't follow anywhere else in any of this stuff. So we got these late today, so just haven't had time to digest.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the 2.9 is the projected revenue for fiscal year 2026. So the
I think it's 3.1.
so the 3.1 is that plus the proposed 10% increase. If you're looking at table 7.
Thank you.
Keep in mind that the staff, we're not asking the council to take action tonight. And so if there's more clarification you'd like us to come back with when we are asking for action or in advance of that, please let us know. If Councilmember Pride, you'd like us to somehow further, delineate exactly how the 900,000 and the 2.9 and all of that fits together. We're happy to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions on these financial projections here?
Yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
When I look at page 8 of 19, I ballpark what you're talking about is about $18 million in gross receipts, $10.2 million in operating expense, including the debt service. That leaves you $7.8 million for the capital improvement. But I still don't follow that 900,000 because it's actually 840,000, 860,000. You say it's included, but then this all talks about it. So I'm looking for a revenue, annual revenue from this. And all I can see is the individual accounts. There's nothing that tells me what the gross annual revenue is per year from these rate studies. So
Okay.
I don't follow. Maybe somebody else can clarify it for me later, but I'm with her. It doesn't make sense because I say you have $2.4 million reserve at the end of the year, end of the 5 years.
So the gross revenue expected from the rates is, again, this is more in the detailed tables here. I kept the presentation, all the numbers are just into this chart here. But the revenues expected from the rates are in table 7 of that detailed packet. The line item sewer service fees, or actually, if you look at the line item revenues over 12 months, that's the annual revenues that will be collected from sewer rates. So for the first year, it's $3.1 million is the total amount expected to be collected. And then in fiscal year 2028, we're proposing a second 10% increase, which would increase the revenues to that 3.42 million.
Why doesn't it show that in real time on this? Besides just
In the presentation, you mean?
because you're talking numbers, but we have to guess what the total revenue increase is.
Right.
So it just shows 10%, 10%, 10%.
Yes,
But with a
it's
10% increase, the third year goes down.
To see it on this table 7 in this packet.
So
yeah. So on
on page
the
8.
chart, it's the yellow line. But we don't have the numbers written out on the chart, but I can certainly add that. If it would help to see the total revenues each year. So
I'm used to looking at total statement. Shows this is the gross revenue. This is line item where it all goes, and this is what's left over. We started with this. This is what we took in. This is what we spent. So let's see that. And I don't see anywhere where it shows 18 million.
Well, and it may just be a function in the initial PowerPoint presentation. It's just a one-page statement that says current revenues of about 2.9. And then it's showing the basically $2,040,000 in expenses. But when you start looking at your table 7 for fiscal 26 and 27, it shows, revenues over 12 months of 3.1. It shows the beginning $1.6 million beginning fund balance. But then it's showing the revenues again, the expenses, but it shows a total net revenue. It shows a negative at the end of the day. So how in the year before that were we $840,000 above?
So the $840,000 above is revenues before
CIP.
capital spending was factored in.
That finally made the button click. So that 800,000 a year is the CIP. Those are the actual projects because the rest is operating expenses and debt service.
Yes. So table 7 has the negative 22,000 is after the CIP is also taken out.
So what would have made this all easier for me, and I'll apologize, just, we're trying to digest this in very little bits of time.
Yes, I
If on
understand.
that page 7 of 10, it had added the 800,000 of CIP projects, you know, to show a complete use of all the money in a year.
Okay, yeah, I can add more information about which
For
projects
those of
are
us
this.
who, you know,
Okay.
are entering your world tonight, right?
Okay.
Thank
Yes. The way we have it here is just the CIP over the 5 years, but I can certainly show that split across. But yes, we are expecting that 800,000 will be spent towards capital projects.
Bottom line is we have a decrease in some cases and an increase for the coming year and an increase in others, right?
Mm-hmm.
To each customer?
Just overall enterprise
Overall.
fund. Is that what you're talking about? Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
by reading the write-up, it looks like
Yes.
we have some that went down for the first year.
Yes. Yes. So in the first 2 years, we are projecting that some of your reserves will be spent down to cover capital projects. But then overall, over the 5 years, it's designed so that your reserves are built back up to where they are now.
We interrupt you, or are you done with your presentation?
I'm
Oh,
ready to
no.
go on to I'm ready to move to rates. I'm sorry for
Okay.
the
I have
derail.
I have a lot more detail now about how this will look in the specific rates if we're ready. Okay. So if you could go ahead to the next slide. So the next aspect is, yeah, we know the total amount we want to collect, and we're going to allocate that to different customers. So here's just a look at the city's current rate structure. And I'd like to point out a few initial considerations we had in mind. So all customers pay a fixed charge. And throughout the presentation, I've listed all the charges as monthly, just so it's a little more digestible. Although, like I said, most customers are billed annually on the tax roll. For residential customers, there's a fixed charge only. Whereas commercial customers are billed a fixed charge in addition to a volumetric charge. And the volumetric charge is assessed based on winter water usage. The reason is because winter water usage is kind of the best approximation we have of measuring the individual sewer flows of each person, since sewer discharge itself is not metered at individual homes or businesses. So the considerations we had in mind with this, and you will see how this plays forward in our rate design. The city's current multifamily residential rate is very low in comparison to other customer classes. Typically, we see that multifamily dwellings, such as apartments, tend to use about 75% of the amount of water in winter as a single family home. And the city's current multifamily rate is less than half of the single family rate. So one adjustment that we're proposing to make with the rate design is to increase the multifamily rate proportionally to about 75% of the single family rate. The second consideration that we have is concerning commercial customers. So currently, commercial customers pay the highest fixed charge of any customer class, and then they pay the additional volumetric charges. We are going to propose first that the volumetric charges be slightly simplified. So instead of all of these customer classes, we will just propose to have customers into low, medium, and high strength categories. The strength categories recognize that different types of business have different pollutants that need to be treated. So like somewhere like a restaurant or a large market discharges a lot of fats, oils, and grease that are more costly to treat. So their volumetric charge should be higher in comparison to something that has very low pollutants, like a laundromat, for instance. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So here, like you mentioned, the current single family rate of about $74 is relatively high compared to other agencies within the region. Although I would like to point out that this chart reflects current rates at most cities, and many cities have not increased their rates in a long time. You know, some cities haven't increased. So, for instance, Red Bluff is the lowest on the chart, but they haven't increased their rate since 2012, and they're looking at a big increase within the next year or two. But yes, the city is currently on the higher end. If you could move to the next slide, please. So, our proposal for the rate design, like I touched on, is that we're not proposing to change anything about how residential customers are billed. We are going to propose that multifamily customers be billed proportionally more, but they will continue to be billed a fixed charge. For commercial customers, we are proposing to restructure how the volumetric charge is applied to each customer. So what we're going to propose is that the extra volumetric charges only be billed to customers who use above the typical use of one single family dwelling. The reason for that being that, you know, the capacity in the system is typically sized for single family homes, and commercial customers who use above that should be billed a volumetric charge based, again, it will still be based on their winter water usage, but to reflect that they are proportionally a much higher user of the system than an average dwelling. So if you could go to the next slide, please. The way this will look, the main thing I want to point out on this chart, I know it looks a little confusing, is if you look at the orange section, the main change is that multifamily residential customers are going to make up a larger portion of sewer revenues under this plan. And then wait till she's. Thank you. So here is the detail on how each customer's base rate is calculated. And this is a little complicated, if you just bear with me. So what we did is we took a detailed look at the city's budgeted costs, and we're allocating them based on whether they are a customer service cost or a cost that varies based on sewage flow and pollutant strength. So any costs that are related to customer service and are more fixed expenses that don't vary based on the amount of sewage flow are proposed to be allocated equally between all customers. And then the remaining portion of the proposed fixed rate for all customers will vary based on that customer's sewage strength. So the customer service piece is going to recover costs for things like salaries and benefits and insurance. That's what goes into the customer service charge calculation, whereas the flow charge calculation and strength charge calculation is based on variable expenses like what the city pays PG&E for utilities at the plant, or any like maintenance of equipment, since that's more directly tied to how much is flowing into the sewer. So the end result, if you could go to the next slide, please, is that for most single family residential customers in the first year, so again, that would be this year on the tax roll, the bill is going to have only a very slight increase under this draft, and increase to $75. The multifamily bill is proposed to have a larger increase, since it is proposed to be 75% of the single family bill based on our analysis of water usage. And then for most customers that are non-residential, the bills will decrease. The fixed charge is going to decrease for all customers except high strength customers, which are customers like restaurants. And then the volumetric charges would only be billed for use above the average use for one dwelling. And I have an example of how that would be calculated, but the impacts will be variable based on each customer's individual winter water usage, since For commercial customers, their bills are based on individual water usage. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So here's a chart again. So the city is largely, the vast majority of the city's customer base is single family residential. For those customers, there would be only a minimal change in the bill under this proposal. And then if you'll go to the next slide, please. For commercial customers, their customer class is proposed to be changed and look a little different, but we're just consolidating to make things simpler. And then if you'll go to the next slide, I included an example for the average commercial customer. The majority of commercial customers in the city are in the medium strength category based on the current classifications. So if you'll notice, the bill using 8 units of water would be the new minimum monthly bill for a commercial customer. So currently they are charged about $131 on a monthly basis, whereas the proposal is that that would be reduced to $75 based on the new fixed charge calculation. For customers using above that 8-unit minimum, I've put as an example 15 units because that's the average current winter water usage for commercial customers in the city. So in that case, the bill would also decrease just to a slightly lower degree. So that's all I have on the rate design proposal. The final slide I have here, before I ask you for further comments and direction, is just our proposed schedule. So again, I know you're just seeing this for the first time tonight, so I would love any on all comments, feedback. And our plan is to revise this and have a more finalized version of a rate proposal for you ready for May 12th, which would allow the city to mail notices by the end of May and get the rates in for a hearing July 14th.
Well, I'd ask for comment from the public, but I don't see any public. So I will defer to, who wants to start? Matt?
I'm supportive of all this. Really great presentation. That's all I got.
Harry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Sophia, for the presentation. I do appreciate the information you put together. I haven't been through the Prop 218 process before here, and it was quite a process. And 2 other times with the local groundwater authority, I understand this is complicated stuff. You know, there's a lot of information there, and but I'm really pleased to when I saw the proposal, when I opened it up, I was really pleased to see multifamily come in line. Our last study, you see the numbers. It was off kilter, but the rate study was based on the standardized method of operation, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say the term right, but what's the term? What are the buzzwords there? I know it's a cost of delivery of the services.
Yeah, the cost,
but anyway,
cost of service.
And I really appreciate the fact that you put the regional comparison, because it all depends what soils you're on. So we're often compared to Orland, for example. Well, Orland doesn't have to treat their sewage, basically. It goes out in the gravel because they're on a gravel strata. And we can't do that in Willows because of our clay soil structures, as you well know. So I just wanted to point out the current Williams rate at $99 a month, our current residential rate at $74 a month. So I like that, because Williams soils is comparatively the same, very similar to our current soil structures we have here. So one of the one half of my life on the ag side. So I was an ag science student, right? And I was a soil judger. So, and I judged soils in Williams. So anyway, but you know, with the additional expenses, the state requirements in order to to effectively treat the sewage, right? There's, you know, as you look at the different cities in Northern California, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, a lot of it's based on soil structure and the type of operation you have. Like Maxwell is you know, obviously they're not incorporated. It's a very small. I don't know if they do anymore, but they had one full-time employee and a part-time employee, basically. You know,
Right.
treating the small community sewage there. But anyway, I do like that comparison in here. That's really relevant. That's really relevant. And you know, we went 14 years before 2020 out a rate increase, which put us in a huge rate increase because we kicked the can down the road. None of us wanted to increase taxes, and we took plenty of fire and hell for that, city council. But and talking about having a health reserve, exactly, we have to have a health reserve. We have to, because there are constantly unexpected high costs coming up with sewage repairs. We've really seen that the last 2 years here in City of Willows with a treatment plant that was constructed in 2007, I believe. And it's aging. It's aging. It's a good plant, works great, but things are rusting out, right? Treating sewage is tough business. So, not to mention our infrastructure, and had a lot of line repairs. So, I'm with Matt. I'm in complete agreement of moving forward. I like the residential or the multifamily increases, trying to hold the line on the residential and many commercial decreases. Very good. I think this is where we need to be, and moving forward. But we need to continue moving forward with modest rate increases. We're to stay ahead of the game, not get behind the game again. So we're sitting on top of 160% plus for existing sewage line. As you know, right? You did the study. You know, is a century or more old, right? And it's broken, and we're fixing it. And this is one of the ways we're getting the funding to stay ahead of the game. So it's important stuff. Nobody sees it, but it gets done, right? Well,
Right.
when it stops working, everyone will see it, and then we got a big problem. So I'm in absolute favor of you know, I know this is not an action item tonight. I appreciate your presentation. I think you did a good job in your presentation. I understand the questions from my colleagues because there's a lot of moving parts to this stuff, right? And
Right.
and it does all come together here. So, but thank you, Sophia. That's all I have. Thank you.
So just a couple comments. I agree. I like the new numbers. I like seeing the leveling up of the multifamily. One of the things too with commercial, when we start looking and we say other commercial, and you've adjusted for it where some of our smaller retail businesses downtown that maybe just have a small bathroom and there's one employee and they were having these huge charges on volumetric side. So I think you brought that down. But a question is for the first 8 HCF, and I think you mentioned it, but I didn't catch it. What was the rationale for using 8 HCF as the base for commercial?
Sure. Yeah. So that's based on estimated single family usage is 8 HCF. So we matched commercial to that, reflecting that it's, one equivalent.
Okay. Because the only thing I can see from some of our downtown businesses is where they're there 5 days a week and there's one person and, that's not the same usage. So I wondered if we just might get a little pushback from some people that, how'd you come up with 8? And that other commercial is a huge, there's just a lot of variety in there. But overall, it's come down, which I think is going to go a long way with some of our downtown owners not having been happy. Last question, it's kind of a Prop 218 question.
Sure.
And looking even at staff. So at some point, as we get some of our capital improvements and our sewer lines, redone, can you do could we do a consumer price index so we didn't have to do this every 5 years? Or does Prop 218, I know they did in the fire studies. And I was on the council 20 plus years ago when they were going to do it and they were going to add a CPI and didn't. So I didn't know if you just can't do that in an enterprise fund.
Yeah, Prop 218 limits to 5-year plans. And so these rates that we propose here would be the legal maximum that the city could implement each year over the next 5 years. So within the provisions of Prop 218, if you could lower the rates from what's proposed here, but not go higher.
So if a jurisdiction failed to do a new 5-year study, they would just leave it at their last highest rate. And that's what
That's
some of these
correct.
other communities
Yeah.
have done. Thanks.
I will.
Current rate.
Yeah.
Just
So
Yep, absolutely. And just a note on this, the hope would be, I mean, we've got a very healthy, good CIP program built into this at $7.7 million. As things get fixed at the wastewater treatment plant, I mean, there's always the unknowns. But a one-off right here is lining the ponds at $1.5 million. So the hope would be we're always going to have some increase in cost, but getting to this amount of sewer line replacement and level of things fixed at the wastewater treatment plant, we wouldn't keep seeing these. This is a super aggressive jump, but we wouldn't keep going up at these percentages would
Right.
be the hope of it.
Hopefully be able to level it out to just keep operational stuff.
Yep. If we do the same 7.7 again next year and adjust for a little inflation, you're seeing pennies on the dollar jumps.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Yeah, and for the just for history buffs, if I'm not going to mention any jurisdictions, but we have Proposition 218 because of a Glenn County jurisdiction lawsuit in the past. That's why we have Proposition 218. So interesting reading,
Yeah.
and it was not the city of Willows, by the way. So
If it was, you would
So-
never have said anything.
so anyway, so it's I forget what year, it wasn't that long ago. But I did have one question.
Sure.
I found my note. I had a constituent contact me just this morning, as a matter of fact, with a question on the church rates. So staff, Marty and Joe, thank you very much. They got the information to council before the meeting. So the church rates are based at the residential medium strength. I'm sorry. Other commercial, under other commercial customers at the non-residential, non-residential medium strength. Why? So question for you, why are churches who generally 6.5 days a week, there's no one there, or not many people, why would they be at the medium strength? Just out
So
of curiosity.
that's a good question. So the strength is not not determined by how much water or sewer use
volume.
people are it's not determined by volume. It's determined by the pollutants that are within whatever they're discharging. So
Right.
Since a church is in the other commercial categories, anything similar to domestic strength. So regular toilets, they may have like a kitchen or
Kitchen, okay.
some small amount of food
Okay.
prep. So that's why
Okay.
they're in the medium, which is essentially equivalent to the same kind of strength and pollutants as a residence.
Okay. All right. Very good. Oh, answered my question. Thank you.
They have a preschool with little kids putting who knows what down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Interesting.
I only have one comment, and it follows along with her about the non-residential rate starting at HCFs. Have commercial building downtown. It's got 2 offices in it. They average 2 HCFs. Go to the church next door. I'm sure they're no more than 2, maybe 3. You go next door to Holly Meyer's store. She's got 1 toilet. I'm sure she's probably 1. So I think your 8 using the residential rate probably would have been better suited as multifamily residential rate. Those office buildings that are office space, service oriented, not retail, not restaurant, are just using restrooms, coffee pot. Certainly don't use 8 CCFs in any given month. I had a leak and I only use 6.
Mhm. Yeah, I recognize. Yeah, it's tough when we are using averages.
It just seems like
Yeah.
that's a high number for a service oriented business that doesn't have public restrooms.
Well, and I just kind of wondered, trying to break out that other commercial, because that's kind of where I had went to. That other
Mhm.
commercial is so broad, and there's a lot of very low intensity business offices. But then how do you manage? I mean, how do you figure that out to allocate that, right? That becomes another issue.
Well, it's a difficult question,
Use.
but I don't see, it's a better rate for now.
It's going to get better, Joe said.
Won't increase greatly, I think. That's my
Okay. This was not an action item. Have we provided enough comments and directions?
Yeah, so I'll certainly revise how the
Yeah, please.
financial
Yeah.
plan is presented.
People like me, and
Yeah.
thank you, Rick, for being in the same place I was. And I apologize for taking so much time to get the little light bulb to go off.
Still don't
No,
know.
Stone, I know, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts here.
I'm used to seeing a detail behind it. All I see is a singular rate.
Mhm.
I don't see annual rates. All that equates.
I see. Yeah. Usually people ask me to see fewer numbers, so but I will add more details on that. And we certainly have a lot of information and details on the capital improvements that are planned as well. In terms of the rate design, are there any other changes you'd like to see, options you'd like to explore? Okay.
It's a overall positive change.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. You survived the Willow City Council, so there you go.
The t-shirt.
Get too surly.
There it is. I had the t-shirt. Drive safe going back. Thank you.
Do we need a 2-minute potty break?
Or do we just want the?
Do we just keep going?
This item will be quick.
Item SB1 Transportation Funds. Recommended action to approve the attached resolution following actions.
Hi, Vice Mayor and Council. I am Lori Loaiza, City Engineer, and I am here to talk to you about SB1 funds. SB1 funds are basically it provides new revenue from the state for new road maintenance projects. Right now, state projection next year, 2026, 2027, city will get about $167,000 in SB1 funds. And in order to get that money, we have to go and provide a list to the state and as to what specific projects we've chosen. And it's both new projects and then also any monies from previous year's projects that haven't been fully expended yet. So for this year, we have one new project, which is going to be on Oak Street from Murdoch to Lassen. And last year you approved 2 projects, and those projects are almost complete with design, but they'll be constructed this summer past the July 1st deadline. And that is Madrone Manor and Murdoch to Marshall on Oak Street. So the 2 projects we're just going down the block. So I don't know if you have any questions about this, but pretty straightforward, just a standard process to get money.
That particular section of Oak Street.
I have
horrible.
absolutely none, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Do you have any idea what our increased cost for those 2 that did not get finished last year due to the rising costs of
It's just
oil?
funds. It's just rolling over the funds because there's no cost. The city got the money because we didn't spend all of the money. I have to put on the list this year so that we can spend it.
But inflationary costs. Vice Mayor, is that what you're asking about on the
Yeah, well,
project?
we know that the oil prices are escalating, and what goes in paving but oil?
So we'll have a new engineer's estimate, I think, come out for those. But the good news is we were funded for the CDBG Planning and Technical Assistance Grant, which paid for the development of the plans of Oak and Madrone Street. So that does help offset in the tune of $60,000 or so, any price increase. So that's what we're currently paying Lori to design out of. But yeah, you want to speak to that?
Correct. Yeah, and I'll look at our final engineer's estimate, but right now the engineer's estimate that we have was well within the CIP funding we had for the project. So we're not expecting that we'll have a problem. I'll let you know if we have final design. So right now, it's all good. We're all within the proof.
Mr. Vice Mayor, it'd certainly be nice to see these projects completed. We've been
100%.
talking about that and taking action on these for God's sakes. Hopefully this is the last hurdle before this work gets done for our citizens.
No, it'll be done very quickly.
Very good.
For sure. Yeah.
Very good. Good. And Mr. Vice Mayor, good point about the oil, because electric vehicles don't pay for using our roadways. Just a point. Mr. Mayor, you were ready to call for action?
Yes, it was.
Mr. Mayor, move that the resolution entitled "A Resolution City Council of the City of Willows adopting a list of projects for fiscal year 2026-27 funded by SB1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, and recommending the use of SB1 monies to fund said projects be adopted."
Seconded.
I have a motion to approve the resolution with a second. Discussion? Any comment from the public? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Councilmember Hanson,
Aye.
Councilmember Busby,
Aye.
Councilmember Pride,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Thomas.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Forgive me for a moment. I've lost page 2 of my agenda.
Council correspondence.
Somewhere in this mess.
Yeah, it's probably in the back page. I hate to send a copy. There you go. Find it.
Okay, council correspondence, item 8.
Council correspondence.
We have none. However,
Correspondence.
I
Council
actually-
correspondence.
Unless you all received.
I received, and I didn't see it until this morning, and it went to my city email, but to my junk email. So it was sent to all of us. So I don't know if you all saw it. It was from Greg Felton, who I think used to be a deputy, didn't he?
Retired
Yes.
as GCSO.
So he had sent us an email. It's not very long. I'll just read it really quick. Dear members of the Willow City Council, as a resident of Glenn County, I'm writing to formally express my concerns regarding the presence of an operational marijuana dispensary within the Willow City limits. While I understand the decision to permit such a business likely stems from potential fiscal benefits for the city, I believe the long-term societal costs outweigh the revenue. Having consistently advocated against commercial cultivation and sale of marijuana in our community, I am deeply concerned about the message this sends to our youth. Permitting local sales contradicts public health efforts to discourage substance use among minors. Furthermore, I have serious concerns regarding public safety and community health. Public safety risks. Dispensaries can become targets for criminal activity, potentially drawing outside elements into our community and placing a strain on local law enforcement resources. Youth accessibility. With the rising prevalence of THC vaping in schools, the proximity of a local dispensary increases the risk of straw purchases where legal products are diverted to minors. And gateway implications. There's significant concern that normalizing marijuana use through local retail leads to the experimentation with more dangerous substances. I understand the damage is already done and this business is being allowed to operate. I would encourage the council to not allow any more in the city and when this one shuts down after being victimized, to not allow it to reopen. I did just do a quick response to Greg, just said, I saw your email this morning. He sent it on April 21st. If you guys want to check your junk mail. I just told him that I had shared his concerns about dispensaries in the downtown. With that being said, there will be 2. Operating with conditional use permits with several conditions they must adhere to, and that it would be the job of the city to make sure that they comply at all times with those conditions. If you should hear or see anything specific into regard to those business operations that gives you cause for concern, to please reach out and let us know. So I did just try to get right back to him and thank him for his concern. And we have one and there's another one going to be opening. So.
Yeah, Councilmember Pride, could you forward that?
It's in your junk folder.
Okay. Yeah, was it?
Because I just looked it up. It's in junk.
Okay.
For some
okay.
reason, you don't have a Gary, and I don't,
Okay.
I can just give you the copy, need it or want it.
Right, I don't think you have it. I didn't see anything in my junk mail.
Yeah. Do you want me to just forward it to you?
That'd be great if you
Okay.
would mind.
Yeah,
Uh,
Greg's a good man and was one fine law enforcement officer. Sorry, Marty.
I was just going to mention that the council also included in your biweekly last week update was an email from Chris Stockton in regards to fireworks and a concern about this year's fireworks and illegal fireworks, hoping that the city will not permit fireworks in the city limits. So I wanted to mention that.
Council comments and reports. Mr. Busby.
No comments, no reports.
Good report. Are you ready?
Uh,
Do you have your copy, Rick?
You may have that back. I found my copy.
I
I found my copy. It was on page 57 to 58.
Okay, just real quick, just update on the meetings that reported on the meetings that since our last meeting. Number one, on April 10th, we had our joint Glen and Colusa Groundwater Authority board meeting. In Colusa, we generally meet monthly as we move through the groundwater sustainability plan demand management slice of that, which is another large mountain to climb, and we're making good progress getting there. We had our regular Glen Groundwater Authority Board of Directors meeting on April 13th. Routine business, again, moving forward with the groundwater sustainability plan demand management. Generally, we did approve 2 recharge projects of several recharge projects that we've been involved in over the past few years, and we approved 2 recharge projects that we've had for several years now, and it's Rick Martin gravel pits and also the City of Orland Lily Pond, and those have been working well, wheeling Orland unit water users district water through to those recharge projects. We continuing with that, just signed the paperwork within the last day or two, and finally we had a Glen County Transportation Commission meeting on April 16th, 2026, routine business. The Regional Transit Committee meeting was canceled. The Transportation Commission meeting moved forward. Again, continuing routine annual business. We approved the overall work program finally for the fiscal year. We had a budget amendment in order to pay for bus number 4, the 4 Gillig hybrid diesel 35-foot buses that we recently purchased. They are in service now, very recently in service, and we were offered a tour of the bus within the City of Orland. The meeting was in Orland. We rotate between Orland and Willows on a monthly basis, and learned a lot about it. So we're going to have after our next meeting in May, we'll have a bus tour in the City of Willows within some of the Willows routes, which is really good because it pinpoints. It was good for the Orland City Council because it pinpointed some of the issues that the Glen Ride sees in some of the bus stops. So I'm looking forward to that. And Mayor Hudson and I are being on that committee. We'll probably both be on that bus ride through Willows. Just good to see from the driver's vantage and the customer base what improvements need to be done. But really, from the bottom line, that is a majority of what I had to report. Oh, yesterday I participated in a Department of Water Resources, California Department of Water Resources subsidence meeting here with the Glen Groundwater Authority, inclusive Groundwater Authority personnel also, and that's all I have to report. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
I'm finished.
Councilmember Pride.
So the new website is fabulous. So that's been fun to look at. So thank you. I would like to make one suggestion because I think our city parks are so beautiful and I think we undersell them. When I went on the website, I kind of looked under Parks and Recreation. We're still just focusing on recreation signups, but there's really no information on our parks, so I kind of just, if someone was looking at Willows where they could go and see the parks with amenities and pictures and maybe also putting it on the main page under Find Your Refuge, so if someone's looking at all the cool features Willows has, I just think our parks really shine for people traveling through the disc golf, all the kids stuff. Our wayfinding signs are getting close to being done. So that's exciting with the new willow tree and the Welcome to Willows. We've carried that design forward. So Joe, thank you so much for all your work with that. So hopefully we'll be getting them up and installed soon.
Sooner than later. Yeah, I just got my Magoon signs. The lady had some personal things that cost her a day or two, but I got my final invoice for adding the other sign that will go on Butte Street.
Nice.
For the westbound traffic, and I approved that today. So we're in development now.
Cool. And then Marty sent out in the biweekly update for the banner program. So we're carrying the same wayfinding top of the willow tree and the Welcome to Willows to the top of the banners with the Find Your Refuge. The photos, we're shifting down to only 3 different photos for the banners this year, and they're actually local photos. So we have a Thunder Hill photo. We have an almond orchard in bloom that Tim Danley took with his drone, so local photo. And we have one from the wildlife refuge that I found and contacted the woman. She's given us permission to use it, which brought up a great idea talking with the chamber that if we're going to continue the banner program, we could have a photo contest. And then, because this gal who's from out of the area, she goes, "Oh, if my photo's on the banner, I can come up and see them and bring my friends." And, so I thought, oh, we could kind of have some fun with the banners. So I just thought it was fun. And I think they look really pretty. Earth Day, cleanup day was very fun. It was kind of a rainy, wet day, but thank you for doing that. Looking forward to a lot more of those activities. And Coffee with Council was actually a good event. I think if we did do those more often, it creates a venue for people to just come in and chat. Probably didn't utilize the form as well as I could have. People didn't really want to fill out a form with their comments or issues, but I don't know about Rick and Matt, but I thought it was
excellent.
cool. Maybe that's all I have.
Thank you. I received a invitation to a groundbreaking ceremony for the new Orland Youth and Family Behavioral Health Center, May 11th at 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's in Orland at 1229 8th Street in the county. LAFCO at our last meeting, it was proposed to actually waive the annual city county contributions. So if that does stay, in fact, hold to the budget, that'll be a savings of about $11,500 to the city.
It will be, 'cause I did hear from the executive director who explicitly stated that that's happening. So yeah, it's
But built into the budget. We haven't approved the budget, so
correct. But that is going to happen, which is about $11,000 a year. So
yeah, just one time, but we have excess reserves. I want to say thank you to Joe Betancourt and Nate Monk for their interim city manager. From my perspective, things ran fairly smooth, and both commented it was nice to see Marty so relaxed. And thank you to Carlene for her efforts with the Coffee with the Council. Well received, and I think quarterly or semi-annually would be a nice thing to do. I think it was well received. I do have one issue that I need to speak with you about, Marty, that I received at that particular meeting, but we can do that after this week because it's a busy week.
it is.
Thank you to the Rotary Club for replacing the park bench boards at Central Park. No more splinters for those seeking a respite. That project went off very well, and that's all I have. So, city manager's report.
Very quickly, I just wanted to mention that thank you for mentioning the website. It is a work in progress. At some point, we just decided we had to stop and launch. But that was one of the things on the to-do list was to revisit. I have some list of things. And very shortly, all the staff will be getting an email saying, okay, now that it's up, go back and take a look again at your department and tell me what you think and what we can update and improve upon. And the other thing I just wanted to remind everybody that Lamb Derby is on May 9th, and the city will be coming out in gangbusters to participate in that, both in the parade as well as tabling for the library and also tabling for the city in general, and working on a time capsule for the 140th anniversary of the city, continuing those celebrations and trying to engage the community on bringing items for the time capsule. So I'll be working on a press release this week for that. And I also wanted to mention if anybody on the council would like to participate in the parade and would like staff to submit an application for your participation, please let us know. We'd be happy to help out with that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Thank you. I meant to cover that in my council member comments. I'll be if my colleagues are interested, I'll have my 34 rustic Dodge in the parade. Rick, you in?
I'm flipping pancakes, and I've got a new chairman that's going to take over, so I'm training him.
Okay.
Finally giving it up.
Yeah, you always do
5 years.
You always make the pan, but if my colleagues are interested, I'll have the So if you're all welcome. All welcome.
I think I'm going to be some public works truck.
I'll have the girl in the parade. So my old girl.
If that's it, I will be adjourning our regular meeting into closed session. Prior to the city council convening in closed session, the public will have an opportunity to address the council regarding the items listed below. So what we have is conference with legal counsel, initiation of litigation, section 54956.9, subsection D4, one case. It is 8:37 and we're returning from closed session. Direction from, I'll allow our city attorney to report out.
There's no reportable action.
Have a wonderful evening. Meeting's adjourned.
Good night, everybody. I'll just call you, man.